Let's discuss why some people seem to think that the digital and UX design field is becoming increasingly boring, and go over why I think that's the case, and also, of course, what can you do about it if you are a designer and you feel this way. So these people, whether being right or not, might feel like the design field is becoming less creative, more standardized, and overall more constrained. There are definitely good arguments to be made in favor of this, but I think it's crucial to realize that all of this might be actually better for the industry in general. Let me explain. Every time there is a new emerging industry, usually being enabled by a very recent advancement in technology, people start to make observations and predictions within this field of study, right? So for example, consider the field of astrology. In astrology, people were studying the movement and positions of planets and stars and were making predictions and implications about their effects on people and just overall about their effects on life on Earth. But what eventually happened to astrology was that a new science emerged from this field called astronomy, which now is a absolutely legitimate science with proven scientific theories, which of course left the field of astrology behind as a set of practices with questionable scientific values, right? So although it might be fun to read horoscopes, their predictive value is questionable, to say the least. What I'm trying to say is that it is not a rigorous science as opposed to astronomy, right? So what happened with astrology is that it got split into astronomy and astrology, and it evolved into something with very strictly defined rules and with proven scientific learnings based on applying the scientific method. Although I am not at all comparing the field of design, of graphic design, to astrology, it is important to realize that every time there is something new, some new industry that people engage in, including these creative disciplines, these creative endeavors, when companies and businesses and people pay for these services, they want to make sure that they get their money's worth. And of course, before you spend your money on something, you want to be sure that it works, right? So what eventually happened over time, and what is currently happening with the field of graphic design, of digital design, anything that is not provable, anything that cannot be proven functional or effective by applying some degree of the scientific method or other statistical methods of measuring cause and effect, then anything that cannot stand the test of this process will eventually be ignored by those who want to spend money on these services. So, of course, naturally, the biggest demand is going to be for those subsets of activities within this discipline where you can prove that it works, right? And it makes sense. So in my view, I think that's why it feels like the field is becoming increasingly boring and increasingly constrained, because it is becoming increasingly constrained and increasingly boring. So by now you should be able to make the argument of why that is a good thing for graphic design and digital design. As with every human activity, causal relationships and predictive values are going to be observed across this discipline, and they are going to be taken advantage of. Although that might make the activity more boring, it will definitely ensure the survival of the discipline as a whole into the future. So what I think is happening right now is that companies are realizing that there are proven ways. Correction, they already must have realized this, right? They're just applying this. They know, the people and the businesses that are spending money on design, they know that if you design things a certain way, people will like what you have created and people will understand what you have created, right? That's why you get usability heuristics. That's why you get best practices. That's why companies keep doing this, because ultimately they are paying for this to create something of value and to make money, right? It totally makes sense. So wherever you could previously experiment with things and try out different styles and different methods, different layouts, you will now have to face the fact that some layouts simply work better and some techniques are simply proven not to work. So as this field is maturing, as all of this is becoming known, as companies and literature on this is taking notes, there is going to be a big push towards doing stuff that actually is guaranteed to yield a little bit, at least a small result. And so what can you do about this? What if you're now working in design, you got your job, or you're looking for your clients, you're looking for projects, and you find out that the things that people want to order from you, the work that you may be about to do, is kind of boring. What can you do about this? Well, to some degree, unfortunately, you're just gonna have to deal with it, right? So it's important to distinguish that the field of design and in general, and art in general are very different. And I've already said this repeatedly on my channel. I believe that art is about expression, about authentic expression, primarily. Design is not primarily about this at all. It is about primarily solving problems and solving them efficiently and effectively. So to some degree, you're simply going to have to accept the fact that there's going to be bigger demand for stuff that, as I said, is proven to work. But that doesn't mean that you should simply give up on trying new things. I don't think so. It is very arrogant to assume that we know it all. At any point in time, in any field, that always has been, and I believe is going to be the case. It's always going to be arrogant to assume that we know it all as people. So trying out new stuff, venturing into the unknown, creatively speaking, might be important for you, because with creative people, such as myself and who I assume you to be, the listener, if you are working in design, if you want to become a designer, you probably are doing this because you are to some degree a creative person. You need to find a creative outlet. So if you go into design thinking that you're only going to be creative, then that's not only unrealistic, but also unsustainable. You need to deal with the fact that while you should definitely have a creative outlet, you are not going to be paid for all of that creativity that you produce. But at the same time, I have discovered some techniques that I use in my daily work for client work while trying to, do some kind of a creative project, some kind of exploration. So I believe that for all of us as designers, it is important to engage in what can be best described as exploration, design exploration, where you simply think about what's the area you'd like to explore creatively within your field, within UI design, within web design. Maybe there are some projects that you want to, mimic or copy to some degree to try and find out how these things are done. Then you should definitely do that. And you should also write down anything useful that actually might help in the standardized, in the more quote-unquote boring parts of your job, because there's always going to be something. So to summarize, it is a little bit inevitable for design to become a bit more boring, but at the same time, you should strive to have a creative outlet and be aware of the fact that you might explore things in your design exploration, in your pursuit of creativity, that you might actually come up with something that will be useful in the more standardized part of your work. So what do you think about this? Do you feel like the industry is becoming increasingly boring, or do you feel that it's the opposite? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you in the next episode of Well Designed. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.